boys. Let her go, boys. Bring her head round. Now all together. Heel-yo-ho, boys. Let her go, boys.
This is Chronicle on WCVB Channel 5.
You know we travel the main streets and back roads, but frankly, even in New England, sometimes you can run out of real estate. But there's a whole lot more to discover out there.
Just beyond Rockland Harbor on Maine's mid-coast is Penobscot Bay, where you'll find plenty of lobster and adventure, with hundreds of islands to explore. This kind of travel can't be done in a 1969 Chevy Impala. Fortunately, we hopped a ride on an 1871 schooner, the Stephen Tabor.
Arriving somewhere under sail is about the coolest way to arrive anywhere.
Noah Barnes captains this ship, our home for the next 3 days. And yes, this is my actual bunk, but fortunately I won't be spending much time here as it's all hands on deck. For 20 adventurous guests and the small crew of the Tabor as we travel by sail with no set schedule through the main islands.
We'll end up at the place that we got the most out of the day. We have the best sunset, we have the coolest walk ashore. Like, we'll just use the day as we can, and then we'll eat really well and we'll wake up and do it again.
And boy do we eat. But let's not put the stern before the bow. Our journey starts here in Rockland, Maine, home to the largest classic schooner fleet in the world.
Rockland was the fourth largest seaport in the United States. Boston, Philadelphia, New York, and Rockland, Maine, believe it or not. Now, every time you see a 18-wheeler on the turnpike, you know that was a schooner back in the old days. The newsboy.
Captain Jim Sharp knows a thing or two about the old days.
I'm the oldest thing around anymore. All the old skippers have died off before me. I own 4 of the biggest schooners here on the coast.
Including at one point the Stephen Tabor.
Built in 1871, that's 6 years after Lincoln was shot in the Ford Theater. Can you imagine the waters that she has sailed over all those years? I bought the Stephen Tabor back in 1962. In those days, she leaked a lot. I got up one morning and I swung out of my bunk and I was up over my ankles in water. I said, all right, boys, if we're going sailing, we're going to go bailing first. Come, gather around me, sailors.
After 75 years of sailing, Captain Sharp has a lot to sing about, and quite a few souvenirs as well.
I had a lot of paraphernalia left over from my career, and my wife said, get some of this stuff out of the house. So I said, well, maybe it's a good time to start a museum.
So he did, right here in Rockland, with the Sail, Power, and Steam Museum, where you'll find historic artifacts.
Right overhead, you see the Stephen Tabor's bowsprit right there. This is the North Star.
Take a crash course in celestial navigation.
44 degrees, 5 minutes, which is our latitude right here in Rockland.
And learn a little history.
This is a little model of the schooner Boden. She's only 88 feet long. She's a wooden vessel, the official vessel of Maine.
But perhaps the greatest treasure here is Captain Jim Sharp himself, whose work to preserve this way of life earned him the Windjammer Association's Lifetime Appreciation Award in 2017, a lifetime you can read about in his book.
It's all my memoirs, and most of it's true.
And we're off.
From a maritime museum to a piece of maritime history, the Stephen Tabor for our 3-day cruise. Here to send me off, 2 people who know this ship well. Meet Ken and Ellen Barnes.
In 1976, we were 4 years out of teaching. So we left our 4 children at home and we went on a Windjammer trip.
It was an epiphany.
So to make a long story short, we bought it.
So we visit a lot of bed and breakfast owners, and the fantasy before they buy it is one thing, and then once they're the owners of that, it's a much different deal. Did you have any kind of a similar experience?
It was none of that. We knew what we were getting into.
And from that day until a year and a half later, we didn't have a day off.
They completely rebuilt the ship while using their theater backgrounds to create an unforgettable guest experience that has brought visitors back for more than 25 years.
We watched them people meet on board and come back and get married on board and name their firstborn Stephen.
It's easy to see how one could find love aboard a ship with these two at the helm. They've been together for 60 years.
I married my best friend.
People ask us all the time, it's luck.
There's some love in there as well as the luck, though, right?
That's at the top.
About the meanest thing I call her is Little Miss Bossy Pants.
Hand in hand, these Barnes take to shore so that this Barnes' youngest son Noah, current captain of the Tabor, can start our adventure.
What an adventure. All right, so the trip that the elder Barnes took that made them fall in love with the Windjammer cruising was not the Stephen Tabor.
No, they just fell in love with the idea. They came back to the area to begin to look around to see if they could find a ship. They really weren't going to do it right away, but Ken Barnes is in a coffee shop, says to somebody, I'm looking to buy a schooner at some point. They say, hey, the Stephen Tabor happens to be for sale right now. He went to see it. Love at first sight for both of them. The rest is history.
What an adventure. What a great story. All right, once the sails are up, the feasting begins.
My favorite thing to do in the world is to throw a dinner party. This is a dinner party that lasts for a week.
Noah Barnes, the current captain of the Stephen Tabor, is following in the wake of his parents.
Right, the job brings him full circle to a schooner that played a very big role in his childhood.
Backing out of our berth in Lerman Cove, Stephen Tabor.
A quick tow off the dock in Rockland Harbor.
Is everyone here?
And we're off. Day one of our 3-day tour, the last of the season, sailing the islands of Penobscot Bay aboard the historic Stephen Tabor.
Does anyone want to go sailing?
But these sails aren't going to raise themselves.
And we're all going to pull together with both our hands.
On this trip, guests like myself are asked to pull a little weight.
2, 6.
And then a little more.
2 more. Just kidding, 2 more.
And then
Drop the line, let go.
our sails up and filled with wind and free from the sound of an engine. The Tabor doesn't have one. We could be a century and a half in the past. Ask where we're going, and you're missing the point. We've already arrived.
I like to think that my job is not to tell you not to use your phones. My job is to remove your desire.
This is the experience we've come for. A small day boat racing off our stern. Breakwater Lighthouse, portside. It's a perfect time to meet the crew.
My name is Sean Farley.
Erin Blue Nolan.
My name is Annie Bailey.
Wesley Osterhout, and I'm the chef on the Stephen Tabor.
I'm deckhand and messmate.
I'm a deckhand.
And I am the mate of the Stephen Tabor.
In the old days, the Tabor could be run by as few as 3 strapping sailors with hands of leather and nerves of steel. Today's crew is equally fearless and hardworking, and the same can be said for their captain, who picked up where his parents left off.
To be honest, they kind of ambushed me. I was living in New York, working at a marketing firm, and having a pretty good time, but they just called me and said, look, we're retiring. We have some other blokes lined up, but you have first refusal. I think it took 2 days for me to really think that that was where I belonged. Oh, I've had a crush on this boat since I was 6.
This Captain Barnes boasts another longtime crush
This gorgeous thing is called Briat Savrac.
that is a bit more cheesy.
Some people ask me why I'm into cheese as much as I am, and the answer is I have a mouth.
This love of cheese, often locally sourced, is on display daily.
Your parents had already elevated the food game, but you've taken it to a whole nother level.
My favorite thing to do in the world is to throw a dinner party. This is a dinner party that lasts for a week, and the stuff that we serve often only happens at really good restaurants.
And what better way to serve up restaurant quality food than to hire a restaurant quality chef?
I was closing my restaurant, and I met Noah, and I was sold.
And this boat's built a reputation, really, for excellent food.
Yeah, we definitely try to go above and beyond what people might think you would get on the ocean, especially from a wood stove. You know, we bring up these fresh baked breads and pies, and people are just blown away that it's made on a wood stove.
It turns out this is sort of in your blood in a way.
My grandfather lived in a sailboat. I grew up off the grid in Western Maine, and living essentially like this except in the woods instead of on the water. It is in my blood. I love it. All these herbs right here I just picked from Noah's garden this morning. We try to do things as fresh as possible.
And when sailing past lobster boats all day, you can't get any fresher than this. But first, we look for a spot to anchor for the night and opt for the calm waters of Pulpit Harbor.
The entrance of the harbor, there's Pulpit Rock, which has had an osprey nest on it for over 500 years. That's kind of cool. Let them draw.
Anchor secure, we enjoy 360-degree views of North Haven Island. Many of these houses are empty now as the summer residents have gone, but there's one year-round resident who is close by, and Captain Barnes invites him to motor by with a very special treat.
Yeah, we have some goodies coming.
Oh my God. All right, well, let's talk about kitchens. All ship kitchens are small, but those quarters look particularly tight.
Yes, the galley is small, and Chef Wesley will tell you the reason for that is because the previous chef, who was Ellen Barnes, was rather diminutive, and therefore it was easy for her to work through. Not so easy for everybody else, but they certainly make do. Ellen Barnes, by the way, has her own cookbook out, so if you want to see some of her recipes, that's available as well.
And you said the food was great.
Fantastic.
All right, you need an oyster man whose work is in high demand.
We're in Pulpit Harbor on the island of North Haven. Actually a bustling summer community, but they only have 350 or so year-round residents. Many of them fishermen.
Today's surprise guest, local Adam Campbell, arrives in true island fashion, by boat and carrying the fruits of his labor.
Yeah, buddy. Hey. I love the man. He's great. He actually worked for my parents, for my folks, on the Stephen Tabor.
Now he works for himself, harvesting these beauties from his North Haven Oyster Company.
You guys want an oyster? Yeah. How would you describe the flavor of your oysters, the merroir, as they say?
I'd leave that up to the chefs, but I like them.
Campbell is being modest. North Haven oysters have been featured across the country in restaurants like Michelin 3-star rated French Laundry in Napa Valley. These days, the oysters stay close to home.
The ones that go to Portland, they never make it out of Portland. They eat them all right there, like 2,000 or 3,000 a week.
Campbell's way of life is less common these days, but local organizations are hoping to change that. A recent documentary featuring him and his 5 children highlight both the grit and beauty of this work, dubbed aquaculture, which can offer a balance between locals and their environment that can be good for both.
My oldest boy, he's 22. He's starting his own farm, and he wants to grow scallops, mussels, oysters, and kelp.
The younger Campbell is quick to give his dad credit for showing him the way.
So you just pushing it.
And right now, the older Campbell is showing me the way to shuck one of his North Haven oysters.
Haul down the sides a little bit, give it a little shake. She's ready to go. Good stuff, huh?
Nice work. Those are delicious.
So it's North Haven oysters for all, combined with our cast iron chef's crab cakes, but we're just getting started. Penobscot Bay to pot lobster, plus steak and chicken grilled right on deck. With this much food, when Campbell's crew happens by, it's only polite to bring them aboard. Captain's orders.
We consider ourselves to be the unofficial hosts of the coast of Maine.
Day 2, and guests are shuttled ashore for some exploration, while I take a tour inland. Eagles are easy to spot this morning, but to fully appreciate the diversity of life scattered across the islands, we caught up with National Wildlife Refuge Deputy Manager Eddie Edwards.
We have a lot of seabirds that nest in this part of the world, in the Gulf of Maine. For example, our Arctic terns, 96% of the population nest right here. Atlantic puffins, a lot of them are in decline, and it's important that we protect these for future generations.
We turn south and motor back toward the 148-year-old Stephen Tabor, while Edwards and his team turn their attention to even older structures.
This is now the perfect opportunity for us to get in and work on our lighthouses. And we can't do that work during the summer months because we have a lot of birds nesting on the islands and we don't want to disturb them.
As we approach the Tabor, we spot two familiar birds we wouldn't want to disturb, lovebirds.
So we got married 2 weeks ago. We weren't intending to go on a honeymoon, but we saw this opportunity and we're like, we're going.
An end-of-the-season tour in brisk weather may seem an odd choice, but the stories passengers share here become part of the adventure.
I found a book several years ago, 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. Maine Windjammer cruising is one of the things on that list.
So I've never been on a boat before. I've never done any type of sailing. I've never done any water sport. I'm from Utah, where we don't even have the ocean. This is an experience I will never forget.
I came for the first time when I was 20 years old in 1966. It was just wonderful, and all these years I wanted to go back.
And for one very unique traveler, this is another opportunity to experience the beauty of a location he'll never actually see.
And back to Adam Campbell. He is rolling now, but definitely took a lesson in trial and error getting that oyster farm started.
Yeah, in the early days, he said he really was doing nothing more than feeding the crabs. I mean, he just couldn't get this thing going, but he finally did. And back in those days, 20 years ago, there were only 3 other oyster farmers. Maine now has 350 different oyster farmers. It's completely taken off.
All right. Aboard the Stephen Tabor, the weather provides the destination.
Tonight, the winds have blown us into Rockport, Maine.
Weather is always top of mind for mariners.
That is for sure, and on our journey, weather came calling in a big way.
In Wellfleet, we're watching the impact of the nor'easter that continues to sit off our coast.
As storms batter Boston, things are blessedly peaceful in Pulpit Harbor, but winds can change quickly, so Captain Barnes prepares to take us back to the mainland. As we rally to raise anchor, a familiar face is raising the sails. Longtime Tabor guest, Mike O'Brien.
This is my 22nd trip.
22 trips across 2 generations of Barnes captains. O'Brien knows this boat like the back of his hand, which is helpful considering he has been blind since birth.
I like being out on the water. I like boats. I like the food and the people, the atmosphere. It is just a different and a more peaceful way of traveling.
O'Brien is a testament to the fact that this experience is about a lot more than the views. There is a rhythm here that over time you can feel.
I'm John Romer. I'm a filmmaker and photographer. I've been coming up to the Maine Islands for about 3 decades at this point.
In his cinematic short film, Morning Cycle, Romer captures the spirit of this region without a single word.
Many filmmakers like to say how they've traveled the world. I'm almost the opposite. I really enjoy getting to know that area of the country intimately.
Areas like Stonington and Deer Isle, where we find Melissa Raftery and native Megan Wood of 44 North Coffee.
44 North Coffee is locally roasted organic fair trade beans, open year-round on a small island off the coast of Maine.
Originally, our intention was to be coffee roasters, and we quickly realized that Deer Isle can be a dark place in December. So there is a big need for a connection, a place to have connection, and it was very apparent to us that we could offer that.
When you're traveling on a 148-year-old sailing vessel with no engine, you are subject to the vagaries of wind and tide. There's no set itinerary on this trip, and tonight, the winds have blown us into Rockport, Maine.
Rockport Harbor is home to a fleet of yachts, lobster boats, and day sailors. But no matter the size or age of the hull, when you need an overhaul, there's Rockport Marine.
So we're a shop of about 45 to 50 guys. Busy season is the wintertime. We store and maintain a lot of traditional wooden boats, and we're also building new boats. Our largest project was the Spirit of Bermuda.
How much work goes into building or repairing a wooden boat? Give me some sense of that.
So we're about 90,000 man-hours a year, which is about 1 working lifetime. Which is sort of an interesting way to think of it.
Sailing is a legacy that families pass on, which helps keep this business afloat.
Fortunately, enough people are still able to take the time to cruise a boat.
We return to the Stephen Tabor and cannons blast to signal one final lowering of the flags. As the sun sets on Rockport Harbor and the Tabor's season, we share a final meal and a very special performance.
Oh, boys, let her go, boys, sailing home.
I feel like we're in the business of reminding people of what's important in life, which is kind of cool. Feels good.
And that music that opened and closed the show was performed by the Barnes family.
Yeah, their singing, their stories, their jokes have really become a part of the Stephen Tabor experience. That last night there you saw was like a variety show they put on. It's really tremendous. Noah's son, Oscar, was there as well. So the whole family, generationally, very talented in many different ways. It was a great, great, great experience.
And a great show at that.
Thank you. And that is Chronicle for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Anthony Everett.
And I'm Shayna Seymour. Have a good one. We'll see you right back here tomorrow night for another edition of Chronicle. Good night.